and welcome to the next episode. Today, we're joined by Henri Beek. Thank you very much for gracing us with your presence. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Not too bad for a pretty warm Monday. I think I think we're just getting into the real start of the hot season this year.
Yeah, actually here it's also warming up, so it's nice to do this today and not tomorrow because they're expecting 40 degrees over here. So,
well, it's a good excuse to go out and get some ice cream, right?
I reckon so. And OSINT and ice cream, what's more important than that, right?
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's exactly what we're here to talk about. A little bit of OSINT and how we can, maybe influence some of the younger people out there, and hopefully help them understand what we do in our life when it comes to OSINT. But I'm interested about you today. So, we call you the OSINT guru. What really got you into OSINT is one of my curious points here.
Well, basically, I was into gaming a lot. So back in the days, Battlefield 2, World of Warcraft, that sort of thing. And you needed some more information on maps for Battlefield, like what were the nice points to be a sniper, or what were the good guides on dungeons and raiding in World of Warcraft. Probably not going to tell you which side I'm on. Also, we're going to lose some listeners there already in the podcast. But that basically got me into looking for stuff on the internet, and I got the hang of it. And afterwards, I diverted my attention to social media platforms, and that got picked up by a private investigation firm here in the Netherlands. And that's basically how I rolled from like a hobby thing into the business, like OSINT stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. So, where did you really start doing your OSINT work? Was it just browser based, or were you using any applications at that time?
Yeah, at the time it was still called Desk Research, and I started in 2008 at that private investigation firm. And to them, basically, Desk Research was looking into Chamber of Commerce, looking into land register files, a bit of search engine work, but not that much. And that was basically it. So the whole social media thing, source code thing, it wasn't, at least at that firm, wasn't something that they were really interested in the beginning. And here in the Netherlands, we had a lot of social media platforms like Super Dudes. Yeah, the names are awful. Hives, that sort of thing. And when I got there, it was really a missing pivot point, so to say, in which you could conduct investigations as well. So that's one of the first things I got into when I got in that job, is to expand the sources and methods to get more information out of those sources.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very interesting point, right? So I have no experience when it comes to doing desk research. So just hearing this from you and thinking about, what kind of information you look into, my mind already goes into what kind of sources are provided out of certain platforms. That one of them, as you suspect, Maltego, for example, we have lots of sources that are plugged in there. So my mind will automatically go to, okay, which data source can we reach this kind of information from? But it was clearly different back then. You literally have paperwork. Is that right? Like
But what's very funny is my first day there at the office, and I still remember this, and still a story I tell to my students as well, is I got in a small room, like, maybe 3 by 3 meters, and one of the walls was covered with bookcases with phone books, zip code books, and I was like, well, I'm in the room where the printers are, I'm in the wrong room, and they're, no, like, this is your workspace, and here you sit, and here's your computer, and go ahead. And I was like, yeah, but why all the phone books in paper? I mean, come on, guys, it's 2008. We're past the starting point of the internet. Why all these books? And what they told me was, yeah, well, it's nice we have the internet, but sometimes phone records are taken off the white pages or the yellow pages online. And then we still have those paperback phone guides in which we can use to search for a phone number of the person we're interested in, or maybe a neighbor. So that really got me thinking that OSINT is more than that. We nowadays look at just only the internet and the World Wide Web, actually. But it's also still about TV broadcasts, radio broadcasts, podcasts, for example. So there's much more to it than just the internet.
Yeah, I think we used, or let's say we have comfort in the fact that we say that nothing escapes the internet. When it's out there, it's, let's say, lost. But I think it's not really lost, it's just there. You need to find it, right? So
And you need to have access to it as well. I mean, a lot
yeah,
of the data that's out there isn't that accessible anymore. You see, with newspapers, you need a premium account to read certain articles, or if you want to go to a database, you need access to it, or you need an API key, for example. So the amount of information that's really out there that's still open, well, sometimes it looks like it's becoming less and less.
have you encountered these problems when you're doing your research as well? And like in which sphere of research would that normally be?
Yeah, well, I've had a very broad scope. I mean, I did fraud investigations in the beginning, but also missing persons, social engineering, red teaming stuff, cyber threat intelligence as well. So it's very broad scope, and then you can see the different ways of OSINT that's being used. I mean, it's very different to look at IP addresses, domain names, and so on, instead of looking at social media accounts. But I think the biggest one we all encountered was the Facebook graph search going down in a couple of years back. I think 2019 it was, June, July
Hmm.
2019. Yeah, that was a big setback for a lot of people, with all of the stuff we could do with Facebook all of a sudden stopped.
Wow. I mean, that is quite a step. But I think a lot of people were using the Facebook graph tool to do some nefarious things as well, which I thought was pretty interesting. Obviously, the sad part about it is it's the guys who were talking about how you could use Facebook graph, the graph engine, for more, let's say, negative value exercises than positive value exercises. So you didn't get to hear too much of the good guys who were using it. You did certainly hear a lot about what the bad guys are using it for. Tagging people out, trying to find more information about them. So yeah, what were your thoughts on that? And how do you think that? Do you think maybe it was a good thing that they brought the graph engine down, or?
Well, it depends, of course, on your views. I mean, I think part of the reason graph search got taken down was also by us oversharing. I mean, us as in the OSINT community. I mean, if everyone is bragging on what kind of neat stuff you can do with Facebook graph search, yeah, you can wait for it till Facebook reads it themselves and maybe start thinking, well, maybe this is a feature we should take down or make it not as accessible anymore to everyone. So that's one of the things, of course, we should be mindful of. On the other hand, there were a lot of NGOs out there using it for good stuff. I mean, battling against human trafficking, or even poaching or stuff like that. And they also got, how do you say that, clipped in their abilities to investigate on Facebook. So from a privacy standpoint, well, maybe graph search being taken down a bit or taken down a notch, because there's still some stuff that's doable out there. From a privacy standpoint, as a user, you would say, well, this is better. From an OSINT standpoint, you would say, well, we would like to have all the resources back, because we could do so much cool things with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it was definitely a loss. I think there's a lot more tools out there, anyways, right now, especially when we look at some of the nifty stuff like Shodan and Census and all of that. But I remember you did talk recently about the tag analytics on Shodan. Has it affected you much with how Census is able to do the same thing, or with a different sort of search update with a query?
Yeah, that was actually a nice collaboration. One of your previous guests was web breacher Micah Hoffman. And I did a small article on Google Analytics being changed. Nowadays, you have the Universal Analytics Code, the UA- code, or the AdWords code, which is AW-. And it's going to be changed into the GT code for Google Tag Manager. And Micah picked up on that, and he made some census rules for that. And the other way around, I changed it now into a JavaScript bookmarklet. So we were actually trying to enhance our own stuff a bit. So that was very nice. And I mean, Micah is one of the people I follow for a long time now in the OSINT community. So it's very nice to have a little collaboration on that. And I think basically the technical side of OSINT is sometimes a bit in the shadows or not out there enough, because you can really do a lot of stuff with looking at source code, looking at certificates, looking at DNS records, for example. So that was very nice to look at that as well. And if you look at Census, it's a great tool in which you can use to look into source codes of pages they scraped to see if there are connections between websites that are not out there on the surface, or in stuff like Whois information, which is also being more closed down every day if you look at Whois information. So those analytics codes, for example, give you a nice extra pivot point to look into investigations between websites and stuff.
I mean, yeah, you bring up a good point. When it comes to Whois information, there's almost nothing you can find in some investigations. It's really everything's redacted or on the let's say privacy setting, right?
Yeah, because of the EU privacy laws, GDPR, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or of course the option to close down your or to how do you say that, close your information off when you register your domain.
So what do we do now when something's behind Cloudflare, for example?
Yeah, there are some points you can look at, of course, with Cloudflare. And what I basically try to do is look at other domains maybe owned or having the same name, for example, as the domain I'm looking into, and see if some of that information is still out there. Or use tools like Woxy, Woxy.com. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. I reckon so.
Nope.
It's one of those Whois tools that's out there. I mean, everybody knows like domain tools, or I think it's almost gone now. Domainbigdata.com. At least it's up and down all of the time. But Woxy is one of the few tools that's out there that gives you some free Whois history information. So sometimes people don't use Cloudflare at the beginning, but they start using it a couple of months in when they registered the domain. And sometimes you have the option to see who was the register before Cloudflare stepped into the Whois records. So that gives you a slight advantage there.
That's a very good indication. Okay, nice.
Yeah, and of course the other way is looking into stuff like source code. So the analytics codes, if it's being shared with other websites, in which you can use it as well, or certificates being shared by websites. People tend to be lazy and use stuff everywhere the same. So myself included, to be honest.
It's like passwords, people always get caught out on their privacy because of their passwords. It's just the laziness of making a new password, just like the certificates. And also just like tag managers. I mean, we've done some crazy, let's say, investigations here where we were able to go from one suspicious website to many hundreds of websites that are sharing the same code. It's you're right. It's a very powerful way to pivot through, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I actually had some fun with your colleague Stefan from Maltego
Oh
during a
yeah,
webinar in which we were investigating a website in which you could invest in, I think it's for wheat plantations or stuff like that.
yes, I know
We
this
had
one.
a lot of fun with that one during a webinar, and yeah, that was really fun. In which you can look into analytics codes and stuff like that to see. Basically, they were sharing some analytics codes with scam sites and such.
Yeah,
So it's really
that
fun.
that was actually pretty scary because this was something that one of my friends showed me, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I've actually put some money in here. And it's making me good money back too." And I thought, "Oh, why don't I do this, right?" And I was telling Stefan about it. He's like, "That sounds a bit too suspicious, a bit too good to be true." And he literally did find some, as you said, some really crazy information pointing back to scam sites.
Yeah, I thought it was personal because I'm from the Netherlands, and here we go again with another wheat site. But it was not that personal, fortunately. So that was nice.
Yeah, but that was a really fun example. So picking on something you said before is like you've done red teaming as well. What is I'm asking you this because I was reading a book recently called Red Teaming. Really creative name, Red Teaming, and I think the first 30 to 45 pages was about looking at how the U.S. government and some different parts of the government, so let's say federal agencies, use or let's say understand the phrase or the action of red teaming. It's more like playing a devil's advocate.
Yeah, it is.
So there would be a team of people who would say, okay, this site is carrying a missile silo, and there would be one team trying to prove that wrong. Is that still the same sort of understanding that most people use when they run a red teaming exercise, or is it more offensive?
It depends a bit on. Well, it's basically just the same as with OSINT, right? I think there's still no clear definition of OSINT. I mean, if you ask someone from the U.S. Defense Department, he will give you or she will give you a different definition on OSINT than if I ask it on someone from the Dutch law enforcement, for example. So red teaming is a bit the same. It depends on your aim. The way we used it was to see if we could be an adversary, get into the network of a company, and to do all kinds of shenanigans to get their data or exfiltrate data or even combine it with a physical entry, dropping some rubber duckies or stuff like that, and see if someone would put it in a computer and get access through the network in that way.
Do people still drop rubber duckies around and USB drives and hope for the best?
Yep, and still people buy it. So that's
Oh wow,
yeah, it's 2022, but still people just tend to pick up USB drives and put them in their machines.
that's amazing. You know, when I was watching maybe the first or the second season of Mr. Robot, and I saw the main character Elliot Anderson actually using things like rubber duckies and I think there was a Wi-Fi pineapple that showed up at one stage. I was
That's
really surprised to see something like this showing up in mainstream media.
Yeah, it was nice actually. I mean, I think that Mr. Robot was one of the first ever TV shows that, well, to a certain level, got it right how it works.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, most TV shows, all the code that's in there that's not supposed to be in there always lights up red, for example. Well, I've never seen code lit up red when it's not there. Yeah, maybe in my when I'm coding myself that I'm making an error somewhere, but otherwise, no, no way.
Nah, we can rely on Microsoft Word to do that for us, can't we? Those little red squiggly things at the bottom of
Yeah, but sometimes it also it's terrible. I mean, if I talk with clients, some clients actually expect you to solve your investigation within 15 minutes between the commercial breaks. I mean,
Mm.
yeah, it's not how it works out there. So you
So
really have
you
to expect management or expect manage expectations
yeah,
to the clients.
yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's actually a fun way of looking at it as well. I mean, you've been doing a lot of investigations. You've done a lot of investigations. It's over a decade worth of experience, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Almost,
I've,
almost
I've
two,
seen a lot.
more than two. Yeah. So it's if you can talk about it, what was maybe the, let's say, was there a hallmark investigation that you were involved in that was just something that you would think right now, like, what were we doing, or like, how did that even happen?
Well, there are some investigations I, of course, cannot talk about because of the large packages of NDA I had to sign off
Hmm.
on that. But well, one of the was a bit smaller investigations I took on. It was basically when I was back in fraud investigations, which really highlighted for me the technical part of OSINT because a lot of times people talk about social media and stuff like Telegram and so on and so on. But stuff like DNS records, there's really a lot of information in there that's basically open for you to find. And for me, that was one of the most memorable moments when a DNS record actually proved to be a key to a fraud investigation. Um, Let me think. It was it was a fraud investigation, and there was this person with a company, and was a construction company, a one-man company, and he did some renovations to some, I think it were cottages or something like that, and he made a mess of it and made really over thousands and thousands of euros worth of damage for using the wrong materials, cheap materials, and so on. So the company that hired him wanted to sue him, but he was like, "Yeah, well, I'm a one-man company. Business has been bad lately, so I have no money. So you can sue me, but there's nothing there." We had some intel that he was actually working for a very large construction company, which of course had deep pockets, so could afford the damage that was done. But the Chamber of Commerce turned up nothing. He had a little website, which was basically HTML page with scrolling text and awful blue background with yellow font on it. And the one you start with yourself when you first read a book, HTML for Dummies or stuff like that.
Like
Um,
frames.
yeah, frames everywhere. And actually, well, we couldn't turn up anything. And all of a sudden, I was like, well, maybe let's just look in the DNS record. I mean, probably nothing there, but let's look at it. And in the DNS records, the mail server was mentioned that if I would email this guy, it would not go to like Outlook or Gmail. It would actually go to mail.largecompany.com. So I was like, but if I send in my email, I do not send it to a random mailbox. I will always send this to an email that I control. So basically, that was the smoking gun we needed to have the evidence that there was a link between the large company and his company, because he had a mailbox on the mail server of that larger company. So it was really a nice point in the investigation. I was like, okay, DNS records is in there to stay. Every time I do like a company investigation, one of the things I do is look into the DNS records and see what's there.
That's amazing. So you've clearly got a pretty set playbook now as well, like, I imagine.
Yeah, I do have some standard stuff I do, but yeah, well, I'm a bit of a chaotic, so sometimes I just see where the investigation takes me, and then I will look at my structure and see if I ticked everything off, or if I really have to redo some of my steps as well. But it depends on the type of investigation. It depends on the operational security risks or third-party risks if there are any investigation. So it really depends on what I'm working on, how I do my investigation.
Okay, nice. So you spoke about things like census and showdown before.
Yeah.
What are some of your staple tools when you come to your investigations? Some of the things that you use.
Maltego, of course. And I'm not saying that, of course, because this is the Maltego podcast, but I've really been, I think, really a Maltego user for a very long time of my career, even back in the day when it wasn't that good yet. And of course, since I'm Dutch, I used to use the community edition because,
Sure,
cache is
why
always a
not?
problem with Dutch people. And if I really look into tools, if you talk about websites, it's probably stuff like host.io, Census, and Shodan, and some search engines, the regular ones. But really, like commercial tools or software, I tend to stay away from it a bit. Extensions as well. I mean, the first OSINT course I ever did in my life was download Firefox, grab as much extensions as you can, and have at it. And I try to teach my students a lot about extensions. You need to know who it's from. You need to understand third-party risk. You're exposing your searches. And with every extension you install in your browser, you make yourself more unique than the basic user that's out there. So I think maybe the two free extensions I use the most are a password manager, user agent switcher, and maybe instant data scraper. That's also a nice one. And the password manager basically now is my main extension because with all of the accounts I have going on, it's really not doable to remember all of the aliases and passwords I use.
No, absolutely. But you did mention something that I'm very curious about. It's something that I've been talking about for a while as well. To keep your footprint a little bit more, let's say, on a lower profile, let's say more suppressed, is actually switching around your user agent. And I think a lot of the time, the average user doesn't really understand what a user agent is, or how a user agent is used. But I think it's actually quite interesting when you're doing not just investigations, but also using it for more fun purposes, like booking a hotel room or booking a flight. You'd be surprised how a user agent using, let's say, a Windows phone or a Windows laptop, let's say Internet Explorer,
Yeah,
would
exactly.
would be given a lower rate compared to someone who's using an iPhone.
Yeah, it's one of the tricks we also teach our students to get some of their course price back to them, so they have like cheaper flights and stuff like that. Basically just getting the difference between the different browsers and what you're sharing. I mean, a lot of people tend to use Firefox and not using any user agent switcher at all. And if I look at some of the websites I visit, what would a common user use? Would it be Firefox, or would they just be like using a Chrome browser or Safari or stuff like that? Or maybe even coming from a Samsung internet browser because they're using a phone. Basically, just to think about before you go to a website, thinking about the stuff you have to have in order before starting the investigation is very important. I mean, OSINT is not firing up them Googles as fast as you can and typing in tons of keywords and Boolean operators. It's methodology. It's thinking about what's my question I want to answer. It's what's my operational security level at, and what do I need to take care of before I start doing my investigation. And also, sometimes that means you have to visit one website, stop there, switch to another system or another browser or stuff like that, and then continue to the next website instead of just going on and keeping 24 tabs open in your browser. It's maybe not the best way to conduct a good OSINT investigation.
I mean, that's interesting when it comes to the point of having that playbook as well, right? Then you need to sort of know where to make that next step, which I think is kind of elusive sometimes.
It is, and there are a lot of guides out there. I mean, you also had Ritu Gill in the pivot as well. Does a lot of nice workflows there, but still, you have to make sure that also you have a nice workflow, maybe from someone who made that with all the best intentions possible. That doesn't mean that workflow works for you.
Hmm.
It's always nice to have some best practices, but also to tailor it to your own needs for your own investigation. A lot of people buy books on OSINT. I mean, if Basel brings out a new one of his new books, I mean, you see a lot of people on Twitter going, "I got the new Basel book," which is fine, of course. I mean, he has a nice resource there. But you also see a lot of tools going down within 2 or 3 weeks after one of his new books got out because people are using it massively, and a lot of those tools are not made to be used in a massively way with 10,000s of queries per minute or
Per
per
minute,
week
yeah.
going on there.
No, absolutely. I think, yeah, I mean, Michael Basil's book is, I mean, he's infamous for his material, isn't it? But his website's also quite useful these days as well. Um, you mentioned something before about oversharing, and for example, maybe this is one of the things that affected, you know, Facebook graph coming down. Do What are your thoughts on OSINT researchers? Do you think we're oversharing in terms of what we're finding, or in terms of the tools or our resources? I know that there's quite a lot of buzz around this topic right now as well. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think sometimes we have to be a bit more careful on what we share. I mean, I train a lot of law enforcement personnel in the Netherlands, Belgium, also the Nordics, for example. And I think that some of the stuff we teach them should be known to law enforcement, but not always should be put out there. Although they are nice to use, of course. For example, the Telegram people nearby function. I mean, yes, you can take a smartphone or an Android emulator, put Telegram on there, and put some other stuff on there as well. And you can search for people nearby, or you can triangulate them, or stuff like that. Very useful for law enforcement as well. But as you mentioned yourself a couple of minutes back, there are also a lot of people out there with not so good intentions that can use this to, I don't know, stop their ex-partner or ex-girlfriend or something like that. I mean, of course, it's open source intelligence, and we are allowed to share all of these things, and a lot of the stuff we are sharing is great. But sometimes by sharing stuff, we give away the edge law enforcement has over cyber criminals, human traffickers, people like that. And I think sometimes that's a shame because by oversharing, we are sometimes hindering investigations. And I think that's not what you want to do. I
Hmm.
mean, a couple of years back, I had a Twitter account myself sharing all of the stuff that's out there as well. And then I had a sort of a thought on this. And I was like, I'm going to quit my Twitter account, stop sharing this, and be not the one that shares maybe a topic where someone's investigation goes down the drain. Now I am back since I think about 6 or 9 months with a Twitter account, still not tweeting that much. And I try to look at everything that I tweet or retweet from someone to see, well, if this is something I can tweet, if it's maybe something that's responsible to tweet, and if I'm not sure if it's something I stand behind, I'm not going to tweet it. So I'm not very active on my social media accounts. I read a lot and I use it a lot to read stuff from others, but I'm very mindful of what I'm sharing. And yet again, I mean, I have some bookmarklets on GitHub with senses as well. And basically, yes, you could abuse them, of course, as well. So it's a very thin line, a balance where you have to walk this. But I've been a bit more mindful in what I'm sharing online. And I think some of the communities sometimes could be a bit more careful in what they're sharing as well.
No, true. I think it's one of those sensitivity topics, isn't it? And I think everyone wants to learn about Intel. Well, everyone who's got a passion for it, definitely they want to learn about Intel, or let's say intelligence, so to speak. But where do you go to find out about Intel? So this was part of this whole conversation as well, where yes, you want to share so that people understand how to do something, but at the same time, intelligence is not something that can be studied. It's something that is almost closed in terms of this fear of access. You, especially with everything that's going on at the moment. For example, the crisis in Eastern Europe and everything else that's in terms of intelligence, where we can find these connections, right? Where does one look? So when it comes to information, when it comes to, let's say, you tweeting about something, or the people from SANS who are tweeting about how to get into the dark web, these are the kind of OSINT techniques that you want to be using. These are the kind of playbooks you want to be using. What is actually stifling that access to information?
Yeah,
It's a hard question to answer, but I think it's one of these things that I think we need to also, as a community, sort of understand where we can go to, or who we can go through. What are the gatekeepers? Who are the gatekeepers, for example? Where can we find this sort of
I mean, there are a lot of communities out there. I mean, one of the newsletters I follow myself are from Sector 035. He has a weekly OSINT newsletter which you can follow, and one of the things for me that's interesting is I try to look at the sources, and if I know the sources, for me it's a bit easier to follow than if I do not know the people behind it. I saw an interesting Twitter thread going on, I think it was this weekend, about someone who was in the Ukraine, for example, fighting along with the Ukrainians, which turned out to be just a bogus Twitter account with someone with a fake weapon posing before a green screen and pretending to be in Ukraine and stuff like that. So if you look at all of the fake news that's out there, that's something we should be careful about. But also, people are retweeting a lot of stuff that's out there. If you have a nice post about an OSINT tool, 5 or 10 people tend to pick it up quite easily and retweet it within 5 seconds without checking if it's true. I saw a nice post on OSINT framework as an example being shared a couple of weeks back. And OSINT framework is a website I think everyone knows, or a lot of people know within the OSINT community, where you have this nice framework with a lot of tools you can click on, and you can see, if you want to look at search engines, I click here and I get a list of search engines. Actually, it is discontinued at the moment. There is a nice fork on GitHub where some other people are continuing the OSINT framework, but the site itself, I believe, is discontinued. And someone writes a blog post, hey, there's OSINT framework, you can use this for your investigations. Yeah, I think it was the former President Ronald Reagan who said, trust but verify. Those are words I live by. Even with my OSINT sources, nice if I read something in a newsletter, but still I'm going to look at it to see if it works, who is the source from the source, and then make up my mind if it's something useful or is it reliable, and then have at it. Otherwise, you're just retweeting stuff or reading stuff which you're not sure if you can trust it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is definitely a very challenging aspect as well, because at the moment, and this is a really good, let's say unfortunate, but also good. timeline for learning, because intelligence covers not just the tools, but like you said, a lot of the sources out there as well, right? Verify your sources. I think, and from my experience and from what I'm seeing on Twitter, it's a bit of a silo, Twitter. Uh, a lot of users actually just don't even understand that they're replying to bots, or let's say those fake accounts that are being set up a month before they make a response on like political, especially political topics. Obviously, there's a lot of destabilization that's going on, all geopolitical topics that are going on as well. And like you mentioned about that user who was let's say faking his situation in the Ukraine with a green screen. There's a lot of this that's also going on in the extremes of, let's say, in the Western region. So in the US, for example, on the political spectrum, there's a lot more work that can be done to verify accounts. But I think that really comes down to a human level as well. So you might respond to something that's just being run by a bot, or someone who's made an account that day just to say this.
Yeah, I have some stuff happening as well on my Twitter account sometimes. For example, if and I just recently started with GitHub, and some friendly people teach me some stuff about GitHub. I mean, I'm into coding and JavaScript. I'm fine with, and getting more into Python as well. But when you just mentioned the hashtag GitHub, there's like 2 or 3 bots just picking up your tweet and just dropping it in a developer Twitter timeline. And I'm like, I will not call myself a developer. I mean, I'm not full-time into Python or JavaScript. But it's just taking it, dropping it in there, and all of a sudden you get followers from communities. I'm like, yeah, but that's not basically what I did this for. But to understand what Twitter does, to understand what a bot is, and basically just to understand how Twitter works. And that was the same for me for GitHub, for example. You have to use it. You have to learn it. I mean, I have an extra laptop on my desk here, which is just basically my fooling around laptop with some accounts I will never use for investigation, but just so I can get a social media account or get a GitHub account or whatever, and just fool around with it. How does it work? What can I get from it? How private are my settings if I turn something on? So I sometimes am amazed about some of the people I teach, and with no disrespect to them, of course, but I'm doing social media investigations for my work, but I'm not familiar with these social media platforms. And then I'm like, well, if you're on there and you want to do effective investigations, yeah, it's better for you to know how it works, so you have any idea of what information you can get from it. If you have no clue on how Instagram works, in which you can now even search for audio, for example, yeah, then how are you expected to do effective investigations on that platform? But there's
No,
also a
absolutely.
challenge, of
Yeah.
course, learning all the stuff and keeping up with everything that's changing, of course.
No, I think that you bring up a really good point here. So, I mean, this is one of the most challenging aspects of investigating, because technology changes real fast. Like, it adapts real fast. The evolution of many tools out there, as well as the evolution of tools that were once archaic and have now been readapted to different uses. That's also it's just catalyzing right now because of all of the let's say. I would just put it by saying it's on the world stage at the moment.
Yeah, it is. It
You know.
is, and that's one of the challenges, I think. Also, if you're new into OSINT, and for myself, I'm like a knowledge sponge. I want to learn everything. So I want to learn Python, and I want to learn JavaScript, and I want to learn this. And some of it I've learned throughout the years now, and JavaScript, I already did some scripting back in the day, and all of a sudden now bookmarklets are hot. So I could grab my old JavaScript courses, and I'm into that right now. But if you really start into OSINT, what are you going to pick, right? I mean, you can go into search engines and Boolean operators, which where everybody starts, of course, with the file types and the sites and stuff like that. But geolocation, I'm not sure if that's something for everyone. Social media, if you really want to commit to social media investigations, I mean, come on, how many platforms are out there already, and how many are coming and are end of life every week, every month? And if you want to stay into social media, you do not have time for maybe geolocation, or do not have time for technical OSINT. So what's really important, I think, is to pick a specialization. I mean, one of the personal learning points for myself is I've been called a OSINT specialist. One of my job roles was OSINT specialist, and I stepped away from it because you cannot be a specialist in OSINT, because there are so much layers into OSINT and so much different topics into OSINT. You can't be a specialist in all of them. I'm not sure what the phrase was. I think it was a jack of all trades is a master of none.
Yep, that's right.
So if you really want to be good in OSINT, pick a few things you are interested in and go for that specializations, and team up with other people that are good in different kinds of topics within OSINT. And I mean, OSINT is a team sport, right? I mean, the most fun investigations I've had are with colleagues and some friends or at Capture the Flags, because if you do it with different kinds of people, you get different kinds of views, you exchange knowledge. And that's the exciting part for me the most. I mean, I'm a trainer by heart, but the most exciting thing I think during the trainings I do with my students is not standing in front of the class and telling everyone how good I am at Boolean operators, but sharing knowledge and learning from them and their viewpoints as well, and gaining knowledge for myself as well. So I have a lot of sort of like a cooking pot or kettle full of ideas and knowledge, and swirling it around during cases, and everybody gets their own ingredients from it and makes their own OSINT stew or something like that.
It's a melting pot of knowledge. That's pretty cool. I like that.
Like that.
Yeah. So given your experiences, and given how much you've been through some very interesting times, of course, through your investigations, who you've met, what you've done, your training, and all of that. What do you think? What do you think is a good starting point, apart from just the specialization topic? So I think you're right. I think most investigators now, they're kind of the jack of all trades. You know a little bit about everything, and you bring these little bits of information together, and you create a sort of, let's say, bigger picture. But I think a lot of teams now, especially in law enforcement, in private investigation firms, even in enterprise investigation firms, I think they're becoming more and more specialized. So you have a certain number of people within specific units, whether it's profile hunting, or whether it's corporate information gathering, or whether it's looking into CTI information, or whether it's looking into technical OSINT. And you bring all these, let's say, viewpoints together. But how does one start off in one of these silos? Okay, let's not say silos, one of these branches of OSINT investigations.
Yeah, I think the basic part really is I've seen all the episodes, so basically I'm going to say probably the same thing that every guest has said, but it starts with being curious. I mean, when I was still a bit younger and still had a bit more hair than nowadays, I was curious about computers. I mean, I started with a Commodore 64 when I was 4. Basically, got that thing from my brother when he bought the Amiga 500. So I got the right.
It's nostalgia.
And after a decade that changed and I got a newer computer, but that's basically how I started with basic programming and getting some magazines from Germany even, because in the Netherlands we didn't have those magazines with coding to get your own game like after afternoon of coding. And the same went for HTML. I was into like, ooh, you can build your own website. I want to learn that. Yeah, then you didn't have stuff like Free Code Academy or Free Code Camp.
Yep.
So I bought a book, HTML for Dummies. It's like a yay book with I think 800 pages.
Yep.
And then I built my own ugly blue background, framed yellow fonted website with nice lines in there as well. But it's really starting out by just reading and being curious and getting more information about the topic. I mean, if you want to learn more about a branch of OSINT, you need to learn more about the branch. And the only way to learn about the branch is reading, but also talking to people, going to events. And everybody always talks about, you have to go to like, I don't know, Black Hat or Osmosis Con or other conferences. Yeah, you could start there, but maybe that's already a bit high level. And I mean, it's nice for the swag, but maybe you could start even a bit further down the road, just an IT conference or an IT security conference, if you talk about cyber threat intelligence, right? See what companies are out there, what kind of stuff they do, what they find interesting, and go from there. And there are a lot of communities out there. You mentioned yourself. There are Discord communities. There are out there, and Twitter accounts, lots of them. But basically, just by starting to read, but also talking to people on LinkedIn. Actually, what's nice, maybe, and I know I'm dragging this subject a bit along.
No, it's interesting.
I just had an intern at my at the company I work for, and I gave a small talk on her school when a couple of years back about OSINT. And normally I get a couple of students that go to me and they're like, "Oh, here's an interesting topic, OSINT." And I'm like, "Well, if you want to know more about it, just send me a message on LinkedIn or Twitter, and you're invited to grab a coffee at our office, and we'll talk a bit about that more." And a lot of them just, they don't use the invite, and they're like, "Well, okay, thank you," and it's being polite. And she was really like, "Oh, well, right, I'm really interested into OSINT," came to our office, signed up, I think, for every webinar we put out there on software topics, workshops, or whatever, and actually applied for an internship at our company. She now did a small project on OSINT-based topic, which involved dark web and some other stuff as well, but really got to learn the ropes in that way. And what I see a lot in these generations of young people, students now, and I'm not trying to feel old right now, but yeah, I'm getting a bit old, I reckon, is, we'll just read it on Twitter, or we'll just send an email instead of approaching people, picking up the phone, interviewing people and getting out there. And of course, COVID doesn't help if you want to get somewhere on an event.
I think COVID was quite a stopper for the socializing aspect of getting to these kind of points of community as well.
Yeah, it is, but we're getting more open out there already, and I think it's really important to reach out to people. I mentioned Micah back in the show. He was taking my topic, and I was like, "Well, I'm going to interact with you. I mean, I can just reshare what you said and get a few extra likes, woohoo." But really getting to know each other, helping each other out. I think that's really a better way to get more people into OSINT, and learning by doing and learning how to reach out to people. than just reading Twitter feeds and messing around.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the commonalities that I always come across when I talk to people, not just on this podcast, but in general about how we can influence the next generation of investigators, it always boils down to the two things of curiosity and passion. I think passion is definitely one of these things that will just keep you driving on, because there's going to be a lot of roadblocks, right? In any kind of specialization you're looking into, whether it's offensive security, whether it's CTI, or whether it's just doing profile investigations. There's always going to be a block, but I think passion is definitely something which will help you get over those hurdles.
Yeah, true. I mean, I'm most of the time accused of being somewhat too enthusiastic, because if someone does something I do not know yet, I'm like, okay, explain to me, how
Show
did you
me.
do it? Why does it work? Go
Yeah.
ahead, yada yada. And my mind is already racing 2 steps ahead. Oh, I could use it for this, or I can put it in the script, or I can use it like that. But therein lies also maybe a pitfall, because there's also something where you can be too passionate. And what I also see is a lot of OSINT community members still have families. And sometimes, for me, I sometimes get too lost in OSINT, and sometimes even forget, like, maybe I should spend some time with my family as well. So that's also something you really have to work on, is that work-life balance,
Mm-hmm.
to keep that straight. Otherwise, it's nice to be recognized within OSINT, or getting a new tool out there, or finding some new stuff in there. But in the end, there's also a life out there in which you have to balance it. And on the other way around, you can use, of course, a lot of OSINT within your personal life as well. So
Yeah, and this is
there's
where it
maybe
becomes
something of a connection there.
yeah, and this is where it becomes dangerous, because you use your knowledge for other sorts of things that maybe you don't really have to go that far. It's like, no, I can just talk to this person and find out what's going on, right?
Yeah, you could do that. And I probably never used a 10-minute mail to get a discount by signing up to a newsletter I didn't want to sign up to, and still getting the discount there. But yeah, you have
Yeah.
to be careful. Yeah.
No, that's amazing. No, that's fantastic. I think that's really cool. You definitely you're on a very interesting track of influencing people, which I think is amazing. I think we need more people like you out there to create more of a buzz in the world of intelligence and OSINT. There's a lot more that can be done, because I think OSINT is very powerful when you understand what you're doing. It's a force for good, right? At the end of the day.
It is. It is.
And that was going to lead to my next question, because I found out that you're a Star Wars fan as well. So
Yeah, I think my T-shirt gave it away a bit, and maybe the backside of my cupboard. But
good stuff. No, that's amazing. Henry, it's been a pleasure. It's good to have had you on the podcast. I do hope you won't be a stranger to us, and we can collaborate with you further down the line in the future too. But
yeah,
thank
sure,
you
no
very much for
problem.
being
Thank you
here.
for
And
having me.
no, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, Henry. And I just want to say thank you, heartfelt thank you from all of us as well.
You're very welcome.